From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is From the South. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has called for a snap general election to be held on April 28. The announcement comes just days after Sánchez's 2019 budget failed to pass in Parliament. This major defeat came after Catalan independence allies withdrew their support for the government's budget.
I inform you that with the power invested in me as President of the Spanish government, and after prior deliberation in the Council of Ministers, I have proposed the dissolution of Parliament and the calling of parliamentary elections for April 28th. Having a choice between two options, to do nothing and continue with a budget or call an election and give Spaniards a choice, I choose the second option. Spain has to continue moving forward. Progress must continue from the basis of tolerance and respect, with moderation and common sense, excluding inflammatory politics, growing and generating quality jobs.
Our correspondent Adriana Cardoso has the latest from Madrid.
Spain Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has called for snap elections for April 28. The announcement came just after a meeting of the Minister Cabinet. This ends Sánchez's terms that started on June 2, 2017, after a motion of no confidence was passed against former Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, the first no-confidence motion to pass since Spain's return to democracy. This scenario was expected after last Wednesday when the Prime Minister's 2019 budget was not approved in Parliament, when representatives from the Popular Party and Catalan Independentist Party joined forces to block it. The government broke their relations with Catalan Independentists last week despite needing their support to pass the budget. Right and far-right parties in the country also demanded Sánchez call for early elections during a demonstration that was joined by 50,000 people. Campaigns will start on April 13, coinciding with Holy Week. Sánchez and his government have said the right and far-right parties and Catalan independentist parties were not allowing him to govern, opposing the budget that they consider to be the most socialist budget in the history of Spain.
That's our correspondent from Madrid. Now we go to Nigeria. A separatist movement has called on the people of Aba City to boycott this Saturday's election. In response, the governor of Ebonyi State urged the people to ignore its calls. Meanwhile, presidential candidates ended their campaigns and are preparing for the elections. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking a second term in office against opponent Atiku Abubakar.
It's important for me to vote, so to vote a person of my choice. Somebody who I feel that can do Nigeria good, who can change the Nigeria. Because you know, for 3.5 years now, people have suffered for this country.
To talk more about the coming elections in Nigeria, we are joined live from Pretoria by Professor Dirk Kotzé, a professor in political science at the University of South Africa. Hello, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So security is a main issue for the elections, there's no doubt. And with violence happening in the north of Nigeria, how can the country assure that there won't be any more attacks by Boko Haram?
Well, the attacks by Boko Haram is mainly in the northeastern part of the country. At the same time, there's the fact that some other parts of the country are not affected by the Boko Haram matter means that we can't generalize about it, that it is a general problem throughout Nigeria. It is to some extent localized, especially in the northeast of the country.
And how do you see the main leaders? Both of them are already in their 70s. Can we expect any young leaders to take over the reins of the politics in Nigeria?
No, the two main contenders, or out of the 73 candidates, the current president as well as the opposition leader, Atiku Abubakar, they are the two main contenders, and the election ultimately will be contested between the two of them. Both of them have been involved in senior positions. Abubakar has been a vice president before, during the time of President Obasanjo, for example. So they have quite a lot of experience, and it is going to be a choice between the two of them. They obviously have, it's a team that they present, they have their own vice presidents also as candidates. So the election is actually for the team of candidates.
And Nigeria being one of Africa's biggest economies, how can we divide both candidates and who can bring more stability to the country, at least from the polls or what people are saying on the streets?
Well, the current president, Buhari, promised when he was elected to bring more security stability to the country. That didn't really, in the end, materialize so much. There's still instability in the country as a result of Boko Haram. The contender, the former Vice President Abu Bakr, we don't know so much because what will be his ability to bring more stability? He has been about 20 years ago. He was the vice president, so he hasn't been in a position of power or of authority of government lately, and therefore there's not a clear track record of his. So in the end, it's also going to depend very much on their program for economic development in the country, because that is the other very important issue during the election, or will be during the election.
And we've seen in the couple of months that a lot of the politicians from the governing party are leaving and going to the opposition. Could that hurt Buhari's chances?
Well, that can be, but what we've learned in many African countries, including South Africa, is that one cannot only determine the popular support in a country by looking at how the politicians at the top are moving between different parties. So though there has been some defections from the governing party, I don't think we must interpret that as if this is an indication of the general mood amongst the voters in the country. We must remind ourselves there's 84 million voters, so it's a huge population that's going to vote in this weekend. And therefore, individual political movements by political leaders are not necessarily an indication of a change in the public opinion.
Thank you very much, Professor Kotzé, for your time.
Thank you.
That was Professor Dirk Kotzé from South Africa, and we'll keep following the elections in Nigeria. Now to other topics. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will declare a national emergency at the southern border with Mexico to fund the wall. He's expected to do so after signing a spending bill passed by the Congress that funds the government through September and avoids another government shutdown. Trump's move is an attempt to bypass Congress, and the Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has also threatened to take legal actions if Trump goes through with it. This, of course, comes after Democrats agreed to a deal with Trump to keep the government open. Democrats handed Trump $1.37 billion to build 55 miles of barriers instead of the $5.7 billion he had asked for. Migrant rights groups say they are supporting the deal, that by supporting the deal, Democrats are simply reinforcing Trump's policies. Now to Venezuela. The foreign minister held a press conference on Thursday at the United Nations where he condemned the U.S. for waging an economic blockade against Venezuela, while also pretending to provide aid.
The cost of this blockade is over $30 billion. And they are sending this so-called humanitarian aid for $20 million? So what is this? I'm choking you, I'm killing you, and then I'm giving you a cookie? So that's a show. And they have said it openly. They have said it's in order to prove the loyalty of the military in Venezuela. The loyalty of our armed forces has already been proved. The momentum of the coup that the government of the United States was promoting is over. It didn't happen. You have to rethink your strategy because Venezuela is a sovereign country.
The foreign minister also read a joint declaration made with a group of nations that are asking for a peaceful solution in the country.
We share the same interests and we will work to defend the following principles. 1. Respect for the principle of rights and self-determination of the peoples. Point 42 of the UN Charter. Second, the sovereignty of each state. Number 3, to promote peaceful solutions to international conflicts so as never to put in danger peace and security. Number 4, to abstain from the use of force against any member state. Article 4.2 of the UN Charter. 5. Respect for the territorial integrity and political independence of all member states. And non-interference in the domestic affairs of member states. Point 7 of the UN Charter. We think that these principles are being threatened and the peace of our states is being put in danger, and we all have the right to live without the threat of the use of force or the imposition of unilateral coercive measures. In the coming days, we will take actions to increase general awareness of these principles and the situation of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We call on the United States government to join this defense of international principles for peaceful coexistence among humanity.
And Russia's envoy to the UN backed up Venezuela's foreign minister, saying that the U.S. humanitarian aid is hypocritical.
The Venezuelan Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jorge Arriaza, said something truthful today. He said that the U.S. is using the $20 million in humanitarian aid as a political card of some sorts, which, by the way, may lead to provocations and mayhem. At the same time, $30 billion of Venezuelan property was blocked by the U.S. and British authorities in numerous jurisdictions. It shows the hypocrisy of this concern over the suffering of the Venezuelan people.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Haitian President Jovenel Moïse has made a call for dialogue after 8 days of violent protests in the country that have left at least 7 dead. Moïse says he will try to reestablish peace and stability.
We are listening to the people, and a package of measures has been taken by the government. I asked the Prime Minister to come and explain them and apply them quickly to relieve our misery.
And capital Port-au-Prince has partially returned to normality after days of turmoil. Still, opposition parties are urging for the resignation of the president and say more demonstrations may be called. In Brazil, rescue workers are still searching for bodies in the town of Brumadinho 1 month after the dam collapsed. Heavy machinery is being used to remove dirt, mud, and mining tailings near the head of the disaster. And rescue dogs are also part of the operation. At least 165 people have been confirmed dead after the dam burst, with nearly 200 more missing and likely dead. The disaster released more than 12 million cubic meters of iron ore tailings, polluting rivers. Over 90% of the crimes against journalists and lawyers in Guatemala since 2001 have gone unpunished. According to the Commissioner for Human Rights, the reason for this is the lack of efficiency in investigations. Since 2001, 229 lawyers and journalists have been murdered. He says impunity is a barrier to social peace. Groups representing victims of El Mozote massacre in El Salvador say more exhumations are expected to happen soon, as experts continue to investigate its impact nearly 4 decades later.
The human rights organizations representing the victims of the El Mozote massacre have announced that new exhumations are expected to take place. The experts also say that the investigators in charge of the case will be responsible for researching how the massacre impacted the social and economic organization of the community.
This massacre has been investigated for several years, since the 90s. During this time, more than 350 bodies have been found. Most of them have been identified. The new exhumations will be carried out in an area where a family of 7 was buried, 5 of them minors. This shows how the massacre was systematic and coordinated by the military to target civilians. Forensic experts have found these attacks targeted mainly minors.
One representative from the organization representing the victims of El Mozote explained how the investigators were chosen and spoke about life in the area of El Mozote.
Both the defendants and the accused in this process presented their choice of investigators. Some were accepted, some were not. Most of the experts presented by the accused were not accepted because they could protect their interests. The ones that were presented were almost all accepted. Among them are 2 anthropology experts who are experts on the life of the El Mozote community at the time of the massacre.
On January 29th, 2 campesinos found bones while working the land. These human remains are thought to belong to Maria de la Paz Pereira, who was executed by the Salvadorian military, along her husband and 5 children. The massacre was carried out on December 10, 1981, during a military action known as Operation Rescue, and it was supported by several military units. Several witnesses have said that during the attack on El Mozote, every member of the community was arrested, including children.
In Colombia, over the last 6 months, social and political groups have repeatedly rallied against the government and its neoliberal policies. This time, teachers are striking after the government failed to deliver on its promises.
Colombia's labor union FECODE, which works on behalf of the education sector, has called for a 24-hour strike to demand better working conditions for teachers.
The president speaks about meeting FECODE's demands. It's not true. He hasn't met any agreement since 2009. Today, he reached the agreement about funds for kindergarten education. Today, there are no supplies for food, no transport or teaching material. Kids are receiving classes in parks in the rain.
In addition to the lack of job security, more than 200 teachers have received threats during the last 4 years.
We also stand to defend the right for peace. The sacrifice of thousands of leaders cannot go unpunished. Duque and Uribe cannot be immune from the law. We, teachers, are social leaders, and that is why we demand the right of life.
This protest is taking place while President Iván Duque is visiting US President Donald Trump.
As teachers, we feel we are responsible for defending people's rights. We do not agree with Colombia intervening in the Venezuelan political situation.
FECODE will soon hand over 6 petitions to the government. If it can't reach a mutual agreement, another national strike will be called.
Around 20 LGBTI couples in Peru got married symbolically to demand their rights. They exchanged vows and rings in a ceremony aimed at urging Congress to legislate in favor of the rights for the LGBTI community. Same-sex marriage in Peru is not permitted under law.
I think that beyond being a symbolic act, what we're showing is that commitment exists, that people, gays in this case, are committed to each other. We live together, we get married, even if the state says yes or no.
And in Ecuador, about 4.5 tons of waste have been pulled from the shores of the Galapagos Islands in just 7 days. According to the Galapagos National Park officials, most of the trash was plastic that washed ashore after years of floating at sea. Officials said they were alarmed to discover large amounts of plastic coming from as far as Asia. We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
an occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has warned Pakistan to expect a strong response after a car bomb attack on a military convoy in Kashmir that killed 44 paramilitary policemen. In a speech after meeting with security advisors, Modi said his country will give what he called a befitting reply to the attack. Pakistan-based militant group Jaish-e-Mohammed claimed responsibility soon after a suicide bomber rammed a car with explosives into a bus carrying reserve police personnel.
I want to tell the terrorist outfits and their patrons that they have committed a huge mistake and they will have to pay a big price for this.
Meanwhile, security has been heightened in Kashmir following Thursday's attack and remains on high alert. The Cabinet Committee on Security met on Friday morning to discuss the security scenario in Jammu and Kashmir. The GROW Observatory is a Greek grassroots organization that works globally to tackle climate change. Let's find out more about their work in this report.
GROW Observatory is an organization that incorporates citizen participation in the development of climate change models to combat climate change. It sends thousands of special sensors to farmers in 9 countries to collect ground humidity data, to compare it to satellite data.
We're mobilizing thousands of people around the world with low-cost sensors and open data to improve their own growing practices and also validate satellites in space.
This way, they have managed to develop mathematical models that are reliable and can prevent fires, natural disasters, predict droughts, and combat global warming.
It's bringing thousands of people together to generate new knowledge, generate new data, and share this data openly in order to solve a major social and environmental challenge. And this challenge is climate change.
Farmers take part in this project by using sensors along with an app on their phones.
The visualization method we use for the data collected helps clarify specifics about ground humidity. This project involves scientists, designers, artists, and citizens. We have a digital work of art that uses data from our project to create designs on a computer screen.
Finding how much water some lands can absorb and retain would be beneficial for microclimates, which are fundamental for agriculture. It would also greatly help in preventing landslides and fires.
We face really urgent challenges with the environment, with climate change, soil degradation, and scientists can't answer this alone. We need data to validate satellites, to improve predictions, and citizens have a vital role to play in that. They can address data gaps for science, and they can also develop vital knowledge for themselves.
Scientists and ecologists believe there's still time to stop climate change, but need to act now as they determine the future of people all over the world.
In other news, the Catholic Church is convening a summit at the Vatican to discuss worldwide revelations of sexual abuse in the Church, which have eroded the institution's credibility. The summit will be presided by Pope Francis and will be attended by presidents of all the National Bishops' Conference around the world. Victims of sexual abuse and experts will also be in attendance. They have criticized the pontiff for mishandling the crisis and saying he has not done enough to make bishops accountable for covering up abuses.
At the level declarations, the Pope is giving the public opinion the perception that the Church is actually doing something. I believe that few things have practically happened, and compared to the previous pontificate, few things have changed.
And before we end, be sure to tune in to Telesur on Sunday. We will show the second episode of our new documentary series called After War. The episodes recount the impact that U.S. military interventions have had in at least 12 countries across the world. Don't forget to watch it only on Telesur. With that, we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories from our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and also Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.